Oh, hello. Hello, Kaylee. Hello, Dave.
Hi,
Uh,
Anna. Good to
Hey,
see you.
hi there.
yeah, good to see you too.
So this is our
Oh,
last
I
discussion.
didn't need that at the last minute here. Mm,
Uh, Tonight we're discussing celebrations and the epilogue and just sort of the overview of the whole experience this whole time and maybe next steps of what we'd like to do, if we'd like to continue meeting, if we'd like to create a space for these kinds of conversations that is an element of the design school,
Mm,
whatever. Let's make it happen.
mm.
yeah, wonderful.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. And, I want to say right now, before we go forward, how much I've appreciated Karen and the way she's held this and brought it
Mm.
forward. Oh, you're doing
Well,
a
she's done a great
beautiful.
job, hasn't she? Yeah.
She's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to get a figure here. Good. Um, I'd like to start this by something that really struck me as I was reading it over. At the end of the last chapter, and we didn't talk about it, there was an amazing thing that happened. On the first day my class came together. It
Mm,
was in that first week, I think it was the first day. It had been Ami's birthday. And Ami was a child that grew up in the woods, living in a little
mm,
cabin.
mm,
No cars, nothing. She was 7. She was coming out of that experience. And I don't know if you remember it, reading it, Ami's dream. Ami's dream, it's at the end, right at the end of the last chapter. And Ami had this incredible dream, and her mother brought it to us. She ran in and told it to her mother, and she had gone down inside a flower into the earth, and down there she found this great queen, a dark queen, who was holding a wonderful fat little baby. And the story goes on. Ami talked to her and held and played with the baby. And the queen said, "You can go from here into your imagination." She went into, I should just read it because it's so much better than, let me see, I'll get my glasses here. Uh, Her words are so much better than my memory. She told Ami that she had called her and was very pleased that Ami could hear it. She encouraged Ami to explore her kingdom. Ami gave her the baby and went down a path leading to a fairy tale castle. And I had painted the fairy tale castle right above all the, right at that, right in front of it, above the blackboard, this fairy tale castle. And inside were all the characters from the fairy tales. And she played and danced with the kings and the queens and the princes and the princesses until the guide told her it was time to return. The Dark Queen then told Ami that she wanted to show her something. And Ami looked and she saw grown-ups walking around. When they got close to the queen, they averted their eyes and turned away and hurried away. "Why can't they see you?" Ami wondered. And the queen said they couldn't see her because their hearts had become closed. And they experienced the brightness of her love as pain. "You can see me, Ami, because your heart is open. I have a task for you. I want you to tell your mother about your dream. And when you get to your new school, I want you to tell all the children in your class and the teacher that I'm here, that I've always been here, and that I love them. And everybody got a crystal. And I took this story, the story went with us. We didn't talk about it, but there were echoes of it in all of the outdoor activities and some of the things that happened to us. And then I noticed when I was going through the writing that I had at the end of the students writing the end of the last chapter. This is 7th grade boy, scented with roses. I came to be woven into a being of light and of darkness, woven into light. Woven strands of light bent to the colors of the earth, scented with roses and wrapped around a queen with a dream to change the world to a world of peace. So I just wanted to start today to say there's all these things, there are elements, we can talk about them, but something held us, and it's mysterious. It's not, it's beyond, and Ami brought that to us right in the beginning. And it was still echoing in the children as they left. We never talked about it intellectually. It just was the feeling, a presence. So I wanted to share that with you first. And then dive in. I want to have your questions, your thoughts, whatever you want to bring. So Dave, unmute yourselves. We don't need any muting.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I just want to express how obvious it is, how much you care about your students with all these stories that we've heard of your experiences and your love for them, and their love for you too. It's quite apparent. So thank you for bringing that to us and through this. I just wanted to share that part.
Well, it's been, they graduated from me in 2006. It's a long time, and at this point, 20 of them are on a Zoom link to get together and talk with me. So
great.
We've got a few more who want to, but it just can hold 20. So we're trying to figure it out. So,
Haley?
I think that just really speaks back to towards the beginning of the book, one of the core tenets of this model of teaching being creating the learning community, how it really, when you spend that much time with a group of people, working that closely with them, and you have this emphasis on artistic expression that allows each child or each person in the room to really see each other. This is what it's amazing to see, because the amount of eloquence and the amount of care and thought in these words that are expressed like by very young people.
Yeah.
You don't see that very often, at least I don't, and I've done a lot of educating in the last 10 years. You know, it's rare, but I imagine that when you do put in that work to cultivate that lifelong community of learners who are learning together and seeing each other, they have that relationship. That is what arises. That is what emerges. And there's a lot of care that I can see put into the model. So it's not just the thought that's put into each successive piece, like reading the celebration chapter and reading how, for example, you know, each student getting their own poem to like memorize and then recall is just an amazingly clever thing, because it, you know, it's an identifier. It changes over time. So, you know, each time they recite the poem, they're a little bit older, they've learned something new and they can get something new out of it. There's the you know, memory recall practice, which is just so underutilized, I think, nowadays, when everything is moving so fast, to just, you know, have, you know, to make the effort to memorize a piece of poetry. So there's just so much embedded and so much thought and care that's put into this model. So it's not to say that, you know, just put kids together, you know, have a group of kids, and if they love each other enough, then amazing things will happen. Like, there's more to it than that. But just appreciating that it really is those tight bonds that the students have with each other, that it feels to me that that's what allows this magic to happen. And it's just been really amazing to read. And I want to thank you for writing it down and sharing your stories.
And, you know, the verses that they did from me, and then later from Shakespeare and from modern poets, you know, doing that, living in that language every day. Somebody was up doing it, allows the birth of it in them. It's not separate. They began to find, I was interested if they could find their own voices. I knew that they should sound different, they should be unique, and I began to see that happen, which was very, very exciting for me. I'd been a high school, you know, writing teacher for years. Also, I was a high school writing teacher. So of course I brought this consciousness. But the other part that was so important is what you're seeing is the whole child, not just, you know, a cognitive piece here and there, but the whole child coming forward. Because I love those little poems that they wrote. They didn't even write those for me. They wrote them for another teacher, 7th grade. That they could express themselves in ways that were so clearly themselves. If you see, they're very different in the way they come forward. And
Yeah, that's something I so appreciate, and that's so needed now. And that's at least what I've seen in the current education system in general. It's like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
We got to standardize everything. You know, standardized tests. Everybody has to know the same thing, and arts is always secondary to other subjects. It's like we're doing the opposite of what we're of having children be able to find their agency and their own voice and their authenticity really comes through in the arts and expressing themselves in that way. And I would just like to see so much more of it. And sometimes it's the way that arts are taught too. It can be, I don't know if I know how to express it in words at this point, but there's like, it's important to study other people's work, but then, like you're doing with your children, it's in your classes, it's very important to have them create their own thing in their own voice. And I'm trying to remember the person's name, Forrest Coote. I ran through him in a systems thinking group a while back, and he had this really unique way of teaching piano. I tried it a little bit with my son, of like, not just playing around a little bit with it, just like just purely emotion based. It's like sit down at the piano and like, all right, tap on like the really low notes, and what does that sound like? Oh, well, that sounds like thunder, and like bang, 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 and so you're expressing that. And what if you tap, twinkle the high notes? What does that? Ooh, maybe that sounds like a fairy, or something, flitting around the woods or something like that. And coming from it from that perspective. I know when I grew up, playing instruments, saxophone was my major instrument, and I got started on bassoon around seventh or eighth grade. I was very technical. I was good. I did well in auditions and things like that, but I was technical. I think I never really found the emotion in my playing until I was in college. Um, and I was and I started exploring more expressive ways of playing there, and my instructor was like, no, we really got to work on this. So that was frustrating to me. But yeah, that's really important for that expression, to be able to find their authentic voices and their own personal voice and how they want to express themselves.
And the whole idea too of the larger idea of that last chapter, the celebration, the circle. This is the other thing that we've lost. It's broken up in school because the kids are sent through different grades, and they can't form that group. They can't form that community. They can go cheer at the football game, but what else, right? So it was overwhelming at first, as I told you. It was like, so much always is happening in these old, traditional Waldorf schools. But I understood after a while that it was holding us for something that didn't exist in our culture anymore in that way. It was holding us through the year, the celebrations, the larger picture of what came before. And the experience with Lenny Panola was profound. That changed the way I taught. That hit me like because I'd had the same reaction. I was uncomfortable and a little, the parents were saying, we should meet with the children, don't you think? And I said, just wait, but,
I'm grateful that you made that visible. I was thinking about there are prayer circles and things that I've had the opportunity to experience here, and part of that, bearing witness to these woes, bringing it, making visible pain, and being able to, as you say, like, I see you, we're with you, is such an important part of weaving that sense of community and belonging. And
because children particularly have this amazing capacity to recover from trauma, even serious trauma, if they're held, if there's a circle, because through the millennia, through the thousands and thousands of years that we evolved, this was developed. as a way of keeping the community together, having people support one another rather than compete with one another. And it was such a difference, even in our Waldorf school, you go down the outside because the classes all came to the outside corridor, but you'd see kids sitting out in front of their classroom because they got upset. They get put out till they can calm down or sent over to somebody else. How different if you just come around that child and say, what's happening? What are you feeling? We care about you. Share it. And the kids flow into that easily and gratefully because they expect it somewhere in themselves. It's one of the things that we bring in that gets shut down. Anyway, that was the important part of all of that for me. Kaylee, you're thinking. I can see you thinking. Tell me what you're thinking.
So I don't want to take up too much airtime with my own personal
please do.
story, but
Do.
I do have to share because a couple of things happened in the last 2 weeks since we've met. One was that my son started daycare. So this is his first schooling. He's doing part-time daycare, and that's significant in a second. And the other one was that my dad died last week.
Oh, sorry.
And I read that first part. I opened it up at the hotel room where I was staying, expecting a chapter on celebration, and Lenny's story was the very first thing that I read. So it could not have been more perfectly timed, Anna. Thank you. Because I was struggling with that. The lack of the circle in our culture. So it feels like these events that we gather around to grieve are not really good containers for grief. And so an example, a personal example I would give to that is, I was talking to my grandma on the phone, his mom, and she was talking, we were talking and doing the details and everything, and when are you coming up and all of that. And then she kind of goes on this kind of aside where I was pulling up pictures of him last night, and then she started getting teary, and then I've got to go now. I've got to hang up now. And I was thinking in my head, like, you don't have to hang up. We can sit and be sad together, even if it's over the phone. But of course I let her go because she just she didn't want to express and be too emotional over the phone. So that made me think of that. And another thing that I was already sensitive about this week, and then I was also going through that, is that, my son's transition into daycare, which is always difficult. He's not even 3 yet.
Oh yeah.
So of course, he was having, I don't want to go to school. I want mommy to stay at school with me. Which I imagine is a natural part of all of this. But he told me that at their school, in their classroom, they have a hiding chair. They call it the hiding chair, where if you feel sad and you miss mommy or daddy, you can go sit in the chair and cry in the hiding chair. And then when you're ready, you can come back into the circle. And I still don't know how I feel about that. And then when I read your aside about, how when kids are having difficult emotions, they get sent out of the room, or they get sent into a literal hiding chair. And I thought, because that's not what we do in our home. If somebody is sad and somebody's crying, we go to them and we ask what's wrong, and we kind of help them through that emotion. And I noticed that children do the same thing. Like I've seen this myself on the playground. One kid starts crying, all the little kids, at least, they just start wandering over to that kid and like, what's up? What's wrong? It's such a normal and natural thing. So I just don't know how to feel about that. And I don't know how to balance in my mind the teacher's need to kind of keep the class in a certain order and keep things going. And then also this just very basic instinct that when small children have emotions, they don't want to be abandoned. So I'm having difficulty with that. And then also just as seeing it play out as adults as well in in the context of grief. So I don't have a point to that, but I just wanted to share that story because that was just so well timed for me personally.
I'm sorry about your father. That's hard.
Thank you.
So, and I think if you were to talk to the daycare teacher, I understand what she's trying to do, and it depends on the chair. Is it off? Is it separate, or
it's in the room, but it's like so they're in circle having circle time, and then in the corner of the room there's the hiding chair. I see the point of it. It's just the name. Like, why hiding chair? Why are we hiding?
Why are we hiding? I would take it back to her and talk to her, and you'll get if she's willing to hear you, then you'll know whether it's someone you can work with. Because I would do that. Yeah. Because it's another way to deal with that. To put your arms around her, take them on your lap, and then ask the group, how many of you feel like this? How many of you feel sad, or it's hard to wish you were with your mommy? Well, that way there's other ways, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Did you have anything particular, Dave?
Well, a thought that came up for me, Kaylee, when you were talking about the child going off to the chair and the need for the teacher to keep going and balancing that. Mm-hmm. And then the thought that came to mind for me is like, well, what do we value in the classroom, kind of educational experiences? Because coming around a child and helping support them going through a tough time is a very important learning experience. But in our culture here in the US, it's like, suck it up, kid, rub some dirt on it. You'll be fine. Let's get back to work. The work is the important thing. Screw our emotions. You're a weak person if you sit there and you cry too much about what's going on. The separation of our work life and our personal life is like a ridiculous thing. So yeah, what's the thing that came up for me is what do we value inside of a classroom teaching children? It's important to what are important experiences, and what's not.
I would say from my experience with this group, what I learned was that there was nothing more important than dealing with what was living in the group at the moment. So they come in upset from the playground. You don't just go right into the lesson that you prepared. I mean, it's hard to let that all go and just say what's going on. Maybe it takes an hour, maybe it takes a couple of days to really work it through. But when you do, then it's so much more.
How much healthier would
Go ahead.
say how much healthier would our society be today if that was like the commonplace thing to do?
I look at it, and nobody's talking about the role education has played in the kind of breakdown we're seeing, and the anguish and the anger and the violence. It breaks my heart. It's that loss of connection. So many people don't feel. And they're looking for belonging still. So they get attached to things like this crazy MAGA business, that's coming out of a deep human need. And they'll hold on to it in spite of all the, simply because it's giving them something that they haven't had. And it's tragic that what they're getting is such a, well, I won't go into the language that I would do. But Karen, what do you think about all this?
Several weeks ago, Kaylee was talking about a student with kind of this nihilistic ideation about we'd be better off without humans. And that came up again this week. Someone was talking about Generation Alpha, and a student, a young person defined themselves as the last generation. And this sense of, so I'm thinking about like the sense of nihilism, this, better off dead kind of worldview that is a counter narrative to that, as you say, MAGA, or the appeal of sexist content and white supremacist and domination narratives and the things that the consumer culture tells young people is the way to success. And so having counter narratives that are having alternative narratives, not just counter narratives, but having a way to articulate what's going right, or the right kinds, the ways that education can be used as a positive force for children's development, but for pro-social skill development so that they can function as citizens and leaders in diverse situations. And so near the end, you had kind of a list of things that had things like Waldorf essential or these are the notes I wrote. Waldorf essential factors for building our relationship, community, stories, active participation in creation, connection to the natural world, the arts, questioning, celebrating, and play. And as I'm getting ready to design this immersion in Milwaukee in a couple weeks here, I'm like, I want to make sure it has these characteristics, right? I want it to be relational. I want it to be active in nature, and we're going to meet in the state forest that's in the city of Milwaukee, and we're going to have the land and the water teach us. And just thinking of this as the medicine, the counter structure to, I guess another thing that's on my mind is like the way that artificial intelligence is. I know two teachers who this spring quit because they're going to be asked to use AI for grading and for teaching in the fall.
Yeah.
They're like, I can't do it. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to do that. And how, it's being pushed as a technological solution, but like, clearly it's not what the students want. It's not what the teachers want to use. It's been being kind of, imposed from on high, and it doesn't, it's the opposite, right? It's the opposite of relationality. So anyway, I think the fact that there are people who are organizing in Waldorf homeschooling and networks of ways of being in relationship and engaging young people with we've talked here about unschooling as well, and then the last thing I'll say on that, kind of these best practices, which I think we talked, maybe I've mentioned before too, when I have worked in public school settings, which is all of my teaching career, almost all of my teaching career, that they are trying to introduce these sorts of elements into a structure that wasn't designed to work that way. But even in the remedial reading, writing, and math courses that I was engaged with in community colleges and universities, integrating arts into the way that you teach math and things like that, like trying to use these ideas piecemeal, but kind of referencing that educators know that this is what works. This is what engages children. This is what, helps people make the kinds of connections so that they have the ability to do higher order thinking and analysis and understand an ethical framework as a kind of an important thing to have before you do these other, add on. It's not something you add afterwards. It has to be something integrated into the whole. So those are some of my reflections.
Well, thank you. It's it's hard to know how to get this out. I also want to talk briefly before we come to the end too about the Citra. I wrote about this project that's playing out down in San Diego where the children, there's a whole group of schools now involved in it, where the children in a circle determine what they want to learn about, what they want to do. From first grade on up. First grade was interested in butterflies. And boy, so you just immerse yourself, cocoons and watching what happens and all the things you can do. And at the end of and so the teachers and the support people are there to help to facilitate, to help them make the connections they need, to help them, but there's no top down at all. It's all coming up this way. The teachers helping the kids. And then the kids, in order to show what they've learned, form a presentation of some sort. They do it for the whole community and for their parents. It can be art, it can be something they act out, it can be, however they present it. And one thing I really regret is that I haven't been able to go down there and visit and see what that looks like in place. The Finnish schools, it used to have this quality. They've done a lot of experimentation. There's a real question around it. It's, Waldorf is still very top down in some ways. The teacher does a lot of up in front of the classroom presenting. And I love the idea about getting the teacher out of that role. There's things that you want to learn, but I also have the sense that, like on me, the kids bring in something. This isn't something I can put in a book, but I feel like they're trying to bring something in that they want to do. I was was told by somebody who could see those sorts of things that somewhere in the middle of my whole process, you're here for the children, obviously. Didn't know what I've been doing. You're here for the children. You came in for the children, yes. And I resisted it. Oh, I was going to go to New York and be an actress. You know, I thought it was, I have this whole family of educators. The last thing I was going to do was be a teacher. But when I slipped into that and began to do it, I understood. Oh, so it's, I was really impressed with that. I could get the book and I was able to bring it, download it for free. So you might look at that. I also found David Graebel's work, The Dawn of Everything, was very enlightening when it showed the difference in the cultures between this hierarchical and a true circle, you know, and that the California Indians had that decision. They decided, they worked hard, and it took a lot of work to do what they were doing. They did not do top down, which the tribes up north of here did. So that's really an interesting section to read. I wish I'd had it when I was teaching. Something to think about as we move forward.
One of the things you mentioned, Anna, made me think of when I'm working with my children or any other children that I happen to be involved with, like groups I'm in or something like that, of the idea of learning together. I'm not teaching, I'm not filling a cup, I'm learning with. And in certain respects, I see my children as my mentors, right? In certain, because I don't know anything about, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, all that kind of stuff. I learn a lot from my kids about those sorts of things, how they think about the world and how they process things. And it's a very, very useful information to have. I kind of view my role as a parent. I'm a human being, I screw up, but what I aim for is to listen, to understand what they're interested in, and then provide resources and remove obstacles that are or age inappropriate obstacles. I mean, it can be helpful to have age appropriate obstacles to struggle a little bit with, figure out how to solve those things. But yeah, that's kind of to sum it up. That's kind of how I see my role. There's more nuance to it, but yeah.
Well, the question that Karen brought in the beginning is, maybe you should frame it again, Karen. So we're finished with the book. I'll miss meeting with both of you and Karen a lot. It's been a good conversation. It's hard for me to get this out, get enough people, because you can sit in Amazon with a bunch of good reviews and not, people aren't buying books as much. They're not. It's hard to get it out there to the people that need it right now, the teachers. So it may have to, but I think it's part of this turning. Joanna Macy just passed away, and I was at the online a memorial with maybe 1,000 women from all over the world who had connected with her work and been moved by her. And suddenly I was there with this enormous group of caring, feeling. I thought, oh my goodness. No wonder they're frightened, trying to control everything. If this is what's rising, if this is what's coming. So the question I have is, how do I go forward with this? What are your thoughts? Is there, we're not going to go on discussing the book per se, that's done, but how do we bring this? And I'm asking it as a real question because I'm a little bit, at a loss. I'm not good at marketing, but it isn't marketing that's needed. It's something more like what we've been talking about. So your thoughts or your feelings about it? Yeah.
I'd say that the pace is important, it's just the habit of this book club that we would tackle things every 2 weeks and read a couple of chapters. Not all book clubs do that. Sometimes you read the whole thing in one shot, you talk about it for an hour and drink a bottle of wine and move on to the next book next month kind of thing. But that's not how we designed this book club. It doesn't always have to be this way, but slow and deliberate, slow and small are permaculture concepts. And so, the idea of little bites and really spending some time, connecting it to our own experiences. And I'm so grateful that like Kaylee and Dave have shared, from their experience with their own children or with, the types of projects that they've been engaged with, that that's what helps me learn, and hearing it repeated week after week and thinking about it on the off weeks, or, when I'm reading, when I'm reading the book on my own and reflecting and taking notes and making connections in the world. So I don't know the answer, but I want to bring up that the slowness of it, I think, is really important and is another one of those counter, the medicine to our kind of fast, watch a reel or something like that. And you get a surface kind of vibe of things, but you don't get the depth and the ability to really see how a concept is applicable in different contexts, and start to synthesize and create your own new ideas from the information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. When I first came to this book club, I guess my personal question and the larger question of how do we fix this, it was like I had this dichotomy in my head as, do we push forward and try to push this kind of model, have like reform in the public schools, or do we just branch off and try to do something new entirely? And my thinking has sort of evolved over the course of this book club. And so I don't have any concrete answers to this, but I do have some thoughts on it. One of the kind of tragedies of the public schools failing so hard at what this model has shown works, is that the public schools are filled with very well-intentioned actors.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Absolutely.
Karen, when you're talking about how, there are people within the system who know that this Waldorf model, for example, works, that there are other models that work better, that we are not moving in the right direction. But they're trying to put in solutions to this system that just isn't built for it. So to me, it feels a bit, on one hand, it feels a little pointless, right? To try and reform the system because it just, everything that gets tried, it sort of gets subsumed into this monolithic top-down model, and then it sort of dissipates out, and then there's no real effects. But on the other hand, there are, those well-intentioned people who know what the system could look like, what education could look like, and they're there, right? And there was like this really interesting thing. I don't know if you guys saw this happen, but during the pandemic, when everybody was suddenly having to do like school from home and work from home, there emerged these spontaneous like homeschooling pods full of like 15 to 20 kids, led by a couple of teachers who are currently doing virtual school, or people in the community, and they're rallying together and helping kids kind of continue on their learning. And it wasn't uniform across the country, I'm sure, by any means, or across the world by any means. I'm sure some were more successful than others. I'm sure some are still going now, right? But that sort of spontaneous organization that happened so quickly, while very imperfect, I feel like that gives me hope, because it's kind of a taste of things to come, right? Because as the system starts to break down more and more, my hope is that the alternative educators and the people who are kind of committed to that sort of an alternative view of education, and the well-intentioned actors who are finding themselves in a system that is like crumbling around them, they can find each other at some point, and something new is going to emerge, So I'm hoping that, like, as things change, we can find those groups and those people and sort of start getting the word out there in that middle ground.
And it doesn't have to look like Waldorf. Waldorf became this sort of little pods that are separated. Steiner didn't want that. He wanted it to be the way the children were educated. It wasn't Waldorf can have its own set of dogmas. And it's full of people who came through a current education system. So what I was trying to do was reach to the core of what was important, and something that could be shared doesn't have to, have the Waldorf imprint on it. Although Steiner had an incredible vision of the way to educate children, which I deeply, deeply am grateful for. In terms of relating to the design school and this larger project that we're all a part of, is there any forward? What would be a next step? How would we go forward? I did a session on natural learning. I did a presentation. We've done a book club. I don't know how to go forward with this.
Are you talking education, specific, like the intersection of the design school and education? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there? I haven't seen it. Yeah.
One of the things that's been, I think I don't remember for sure. I may have mentioned it to Karen in passing. I haven't decided to move forward with anything yet or talk to people about it. But one of the thoughts that I had was designing like specifically like bioregional curriculum for focusing on the homeschool community, but making it wide enough to anybody else, parents that want to spend extra time in the evenings or on weekends to do this sort of thing too, be inclusive of them. But it feels like the core adoption would be like with homeschool community who've already kind of made some of those decisions.
Right.
And maybe starting out, I don't know if it would look like maybe unit studies of like, what is bioregionalism? It's because a lot of people may not have even heard that term before. And then like a focus on like, put wording in there for the parents too. Because they may be hearing about that for the first time. And then like little activities for their children. But I don't know. It would be really interesting to have some further conversations on about how that could work. And
We
maybe
can
that could
also
be
talk with Penny about how that might take shape.
yeah.
That would be good.
Because
And-
aren't they right now sort of building their educational ecosystem in Barichara right now? And I've been following that very closely. And, while, I'm in a completely different context to that, I have been thinking for the last year on, if I had an alternative schooling venture, because I've been thinking about that. What would it look like? And like what would the curriculum be? Would it be focused specifically around bioregionalism, or it would be using the principles of bioregionalism as its sort of foundation? So and I've also been thinking about more of like a village school model that's more intergenerational and easy to replicate kind of in different contexts. So I have a lot of thoughts about it too. It'd be really cool if there was a space for
wonderful. And I would like to continue the conversation, and please feel free to connect with me if you have a thought or a question. I would love that. And I'll talk to Penny. Maybe you and I can do that together, Karen, too, because I think you have a good overview. Oh my gosh, it's 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. It's been wonderful getting to know the two of you. And smaller group than I was hoping for, but it's been wonderful because we've been able to really exchange more in a personal way. I'm grateful to it.
Very much appreciate your time, everyone
grateful
else.
as well. Yes, thank you.
We'll let you know if we get something together. All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.